It's on you, Kathy. Thank you.
All right, let me open up my screen. Here it is. I got to go back to the beginning.
And
There
Kathy
we
did
go.
say she's welcome to questions at any time, by the way. So please be your
Yeah,
normal, typical, inquisitive, and friendly folks.
yeah, absolutely. And Tracy, if anybody enters them in the chat or puts a hand up, I'll count on you to monitor that and interrupt me to answer questions. Or if anybody has their microphone open, you can just jump in and ask me questions yourselves. Gail asked me to cover the new accreditation standards and sort of, getting ready for that, or if you're interested in becoming a Main Street program, sort of what it means and sort of the levels that we have in place for communities to reach national Main Street accreditation. And so the accreditation standards really recognize local programs that are operating at what we consider the highest levels of Main Street. That, we've always had the practices of here's the 4 points of Main Street, and here's how the work gets done, and having a board, et cetera, et cetera. So it really is recognizing those programs that are using all the processes that we suggest and recommend to operate a program. And so we had 10 standards for national accreditation, which were pretty, I'm going to say fairly easy to meet those standards. But some of those things we thought, well, of course you need to have those in place. We really need to polish the standards and demand just a little bit more. And that came about because 7 years ago, we went through the Main Street refresh, and, we reaffirmed the 4 points still worked, but we also found a lot of programs were heavy in promotion. Some communities spending 75% of their time on events and promotions, and not as much on the economic development activity of downtown. And so we think setting these new standards with more description is going to strengthen our Main Street programs. So they're going to be more comprehensive, act more like economic development organizations than just festival organizations. And we want to make sure those results bring economic gains to your community. So that was another reason in looking at them. And communities are going to have until 2024 to align with the new standards. This is our year for just getting communities familiar with them. Actually, we started that last year, sort of broadly, what the old 10 standards were and what the new 6 standards are. And so we're giving communities time to align with that. So even, if your community doesn't achieve all 6 standards now, we think that communities will benefit by adopting as many of the operating standards as we suggest. And hopefully they can be used as sort of that leap to the next level to say, gosh, we could be potentially a nationally accredited program if we thought more about what our economic strategy or our development strategy is for downtown, had a comprehensive work plan, and then we were able to go out and do really much stronger fundraising for it. So we think it will also help cities achieve more in their communities. So a lot of times people ask, excuse me, I'm just warming up my voice here. Although we haven't had any snow here, I do have my space heater running, so it's drying my throat out. But what is the value of accreditation? I should let you know too, I'm in New Hampshire, so we could have snow, but none yet. But a lot of people wonder why does it matter to be a nationally accredited community? I say it's sort of like having a national register, historic district. It's mainly honorific, and then there are some nice perks to it, like property owners can get tax credits if their building is a contributing property, but mainly it's for marketing purposes. But if you are nationally accredited, you're among the elite programs in the country using Main Street. We think that gives you more help when you're out fundraising to say we are nationally accredited. So we're not just, a local nonprofit working on downtown, but you're part of a statewide program and you're part of a national movement. So having that level means that you're operating at, or having accreditation means you're operating at a very high level. We also have grant programs that are only open to our accredited communities. We usually have about one a year. Through COVID, one of our board members put $200,000 of his own money up for local Main Street programs. You had to be nationally accredited to get one of those $10,000 grants. So there are some most of our grant programs are open to everybody, but we are reserving some just for accredited communities. Also, you must be an accredited community if you want to apply for the Great American Main Street Award. That's the award that recognizes the top 3 revitalization programs across the country each year. And the value of that is, phenomenal when you win that award, because there's so much promotion and marketing, and that's really a title you can hang on to for the rest of your community's stint in the Main Street program. Also, it's just a sense of pride to be able to say you're one of the accredited communities. And you also get acknowledgement at our opening plenary at our conference. You get special ribbons to wear on your name badge that says you're from an accredited community as well. So how do communities qualify for accreditation? We do have some baseline requirements, and these are kind of made up of what our initial 10 standards would be, is that you have to at least meet these minimal standards before you even think about scoring in the new standards. But you have to have a board of directors that is representative of the base of the district and the community, and that, they're meeting regularly, that board's job is specifically in the downtown. And then, we know there are variations, because we have Main Street programs that could be part of an economic development program, could be part of the city, could be part of a chamber of commerce, for example. So if it's a standalone nonprofit, there definitely has to be the standalone board. But if it's under an umbrella, there at least has to be a Main Street advisory board, so that there's an entity that is making the best decisions for downtown, and not worrying about 10 other things that an organization might be concerned with. Another minimum qualification is that there must be a paid Main Street executive director. And so for communities over 5,000 in population, that must be a full-time position. And if you're under 5,000, it must be at least a 20-hour per week part-time position. And in some of those cases, it could be an FTE equivalent. I worked in a number of Iowa communities where their chamber and Main Street programs were housed together. So the executive director was both the chamber director and the Main Street director, but then they'd have like a full-time marketing person who did half-time chamber, half-time Main Street. So that equaled the full-time equivalent position. So that's the cutoff at 5,000. And, mainly I see a lot of communities under 5,000 with full-time directors as well, but that's our cutoff on.
And Gail, I noticed you had your hand raised. Did Kathy answer your question?
Well, she sort of did, but Kathy, we have a variety of programs on the call that are, nonprofits, they're chambers, they're housed within the town. And, the over 5,000, we have quite a few communities in Colorado that exceed that, and many that don't. But, they wear a lot of different hats. So I know we're going to get a lot of different questions about really defining what full-time really means.
Yeah, and I'm happy, this is our baseline, right? So we say if you're over 5,000, somebody should be working on the downtown full time. And that might encompass a lot of duties that they're doing otherwise as city employees or chamber employees. But we feel that, you know, you can try to convince us otherwise, that a community of 5,000 doesn't need a full-time staff person working on downtown, because we know how busy everybody is. And even when they're part-time people, they're working 60 hours a week trying to get everything done in downtown. Again, this is our sort of baseline for it, but I'd love to hear people's perceptions of how they, you know, if they have questions on that, I'll take those as well. Another one is just having a strategy for your district as well, with a detailed work plan. Now, we used Colorado as our pilot program for transformation strategies. Gosh, it's been a number of years now. Lake City, Brush, and Steamboat Springs went through this process. And it really is just about making sure you're purposeful about your work. I heard somebody say, I want to look at my notes here. Somebody mentioned that you were fused with your creative district. And so your downtown might have that strategy as being a creative district. And so that would be your transformation strategy. And then we want to make sure that that strategy encompasses all 4 points of Main Street, that we don't just do it from, say, a design perspective and we're painting murals, et cetera, but that we're looking at the business side of things and we're recruiting galleries or performance studios, or we're have live entertainment 7 days a week in our district, or our under organization, do we have the creative people on our board, or is one of our fundraisers have something to do with the creative economy or creative arts, or are we doing a golf tournament out on the, that doesn't tie into sort of that strategy. So it's just making sure that, and sometimes you haven't, if you haven't gone through that process, that the 3 communities that were in the pilot program did, you still might have a really good idea of what your strategy is. If you're serving your community, if you're a tourism community, if you're an outdoor recreation community, there could be a lot of things that are assets for your downtown and who your downtown serves. We just want to see that you actually have a strategy and also a detailed work plan. So one of the things that we have always required is a work plan. This is just a sample form of what a work plan could look at like. We don't dictate that you have to use that form. It can be any way that you want to share it with your community, whether you're using Google Docs or whatever. But the point of having a detailed written work plan is more than just a one-page list of projects. Don't just say, here are the 10 or 20 things we're working on in downtown, but tell us why you're doing them. So what's the strategy? What's the project? And then the biggest thing about having a work plan is, what are your expected outcomes? How are you going to measure the success? And part of that is then just outlining all the tasks you need to do to get the project accomplished, who's going to do them, what the timeline is. Gives you an area on this form to know what the cost of doing the project is, whether or not that project might be, excuse me, revenue generating. Like you could be doing brick sales, you know, to pay for a streetscape enhancement. So you'd be generating some income and having expenses. Also sort of recording how many volunteer hours are going to be needed and how much staff time is going to be dictated to it. So if you have a project sheet like this for everything that you're doing in downtown, it'll better help you fundraise. Also know what volunteers you need, but it'll also help keep you on track for achieving those expected outcomes. So if you're having an event, is it going to be a fundraiser? Is it going to create sales for restaurants? Will it create sales for retailers? Or do you want to look at an increase in attendance, partners, sponsorships, growing volunteer? Do you want to blow up your social media for the weekend? So looking at all those things that you'd be able to say, here's why we did this event, not just that 2,000 people came to it, but it really had a positive economic impact on our downtown. So this is one of the areas that most of our communities have not done the best in having that detailed work plan, yet they'll also say we're struggling for funding and we struggle to get volunteers. It's because we don't have, you know, if I could take a work plan that showed here are the 20 projects we want to get done and here's how much it's going to cost, take that to a funder, they're more apt to fund it because they can see you're planning really well for your organization. So that has to be in place. And this is just a sample of an economic vitality project, and their strategy is building a more diverse downtown economy that builds on their arts and entertainment strategy. The project is to collect more data about that arts and entertainment strategy, and then expected outcomes was that they'd have all the demographic data, they'd have updated business information and know how the community perceives downtown through arts and entertainment. And then you can just see all the tasks that they need to get done. And when we lay these out, then it doesn't put all the responsibility on the staff person. It helps us divide it between committee members or city employees or chamber directors or any other entities that you might be working with, like other nonprofits, schools or universities, etc. But, you know, it sort of informs everybody in the community. Well, this is how much money we need to accomplish this project, but this is also how much volunteer time it's going to take to get it done. So again, you can use whatever format you want, but going forward under the new accreditation standards, handing in a one-page list of the projects you're working on is not going to qualify as a work plan.
Can we, Kathy?
Yeah, go ahead.
Kathy, Cynthia has her hand up. Sorry, Kathy.
Go ahead, Cynthia.
But
You're on, I can't hear you.
you can't hear me now?
Yes.
I got a really loud voice, so I'm kind of surprised. I just wanted to let you know, in looking this over, this is all very helpful, but the Colorado Main Street team run a very tight ship. And our quarterly reports have this much information and more in it. And also we have strategic plans. I've done a strategic plan every single year that I have been in Main Street, and it's detailed, extremely detailed, not just have a parade or anything like that. Plus, on top of that, most of us, I think, have other duties that actually complement what's going on in terms of the requirements that you're stating. So, you know, for instance, I'm the Director of Economic Development, Main Street, the Creative District, Urban Renewal, and the Certified Local Government. So all those things, I mean, I don't have to work too hard to qualify and do this, and I don't think anybody. So I just want to let you know this is great, but Colorado, I think, is mostly already.
That's great.
So, but
That's
they're outstanding. That's all I want to say.
fabulous, fabulous. Having strategic plans, there's so many places that don't have them. So it's wonderful to hear that Colorado's going to be at the top of my list. Gail, you have your hand
Kathy,
up.
yeah, I'll just chime in on that, saying we have a consultant fund that we use to do the strategic work plans, visioning, missioning, developing of the transformational strategies, and an annual work plan. And that service is available to all of our communities each year. We changed it up a little bit as we're moving into the new accreditation standards and rolling that out this year. So folks that are tapping into that service are actually going to be able to take a look and start to do a self-evaluation and identify areas of weakness or areas where the program can help them.
That's fabulous, Gail. Well, I'm very pleased to hear that information. That's wonderful. Some of the other, baseline requirements you have to have in place: a dedicated budget for your Main Street operations or whatever you're spending in downtown. You have to demonstrate you have support from the municipality, which isn't going to be hard where you're housed in city government, but even their philosophical support, reporting your stats. I know you're all very good with that. And also the same standard that's always been in place, which is you must be members of Main Street America. You also need to be using our brand when you sign your sub-licensing agreements through the program, those designated Main Street programs. You get the authority to use the Main Street America brand. And so we want to see at least our logo on your websites, and you can use it in many other places if you want. We've had communities actually put it on their banners in downtown, for example. So just being a member of Main Street America and making sure you have your Colorado logo as well. So these are the new 6 standards. So we went from 10 down to 6. Broad-based community support went to broad-based community commitment. We talk about inclusive leadership and organizational structure. Diversity is a very high priority for us at Main Street America. We used to say having adequate operating budget, and we have now changed that to diverse and sustainable program operations, meaning we don't want to see programs that are struggling to pay their executive director from month to month, but that we actually have a more stable fundraising plan, strategy-driven programming, preservation-based activities, and also demonstrating impact and results, which was a big one as well. I know you've done some storytelling things in Colorado too, is that we have to tell a better story of this being an economic development program so that, again, people will volunteer and give us money. So the first standard, broad-based community commitment, is really about your partnerships and collaborations. So it's great to hear. We have a lot of communities in Colorado that are partnering, have multiple tasks. We can bring a lot of different resources into a program when we have the city on our side, the chamber on our side, other nonprofits. So looking to see how deep those relationships go in communities, how you reach out to the community. Is the general community invited to participate and be part of the revitalization process? And really then looking at your communications and how people can give feedback to you as a program. So really just looking for communities to show that they have a broad base of support, and it's no longer the same 10 people doing everything in your communities. Standard 2 is that inclusive leadership and organizational capacity. Our communities are different all across the country, from those that are in our urban neighborhoods to small towns in Iowa and Maine. And some of our communities are 98% Caucasian, and they're going to define diversity differently from communities in neighborhood districts in Chicago. So it's up to you to determine what the diversity of your community is, whether that's income diversity, age diversity, LGBTQ, but just make sure that your Main Street program represents those that are in your community, from not only from serving on your board of directors or your committees, but also in the activities that you run. Do events and things, include everybody in your community. So we look for active board leadership and a strong volunteer base, again, not just at the board level, but through all your project implementation. Having staff, as I went through sort of the criteria there, but we also want to make sure that staff, and I know Colorado does a great job at this, is providing professional development, and the budget for professional development for the staff person. And then effective organizational structure is just making sure that everything's in place, from having officers in the organization to not putting all the burden on the executive director. So do you have policies and procedures in place that help run your organization? Yeah, Gail, I see your hand up.
Me unmute and put my hand down. I just wanted to mention to everyone on the call as kind of a teaser, next week at our summit, Jackie Stanton, who is on this call, and Tracy Stoffel are going to be covering inclusive voices, how to get those voices at the table. And that's going to be a really hands-on active workshop. So look forward to that.
Fabulous. Good timing for that one as well. The next is diversified funding and sustainable program operations. And, you know, I'm sure you all have budgets. We're just looking for, you know, balanced funding sources, so that we have funding from the municipality, we have funding from the private sector, we have funding from residents, we have grant programs, we have events that raise money. We do special fundraising events, but to really see that there is time and energy spent on developing your development plan, and really what everybody's role is in helping to raise the money for the organization. I love seeing budgets set up to where they tell you, here's what we had last year, here's what we have this year. You know, we always emphasize diversity in fundraising, because if you were 100% funded by your city, and then city administration changes and the next, group in doesn't like Main Street, they can take away a city's Main Street program, just like that. So we want to make sure that we aren't reliant on any one single source, so that way Main Street programs have better chances to survive when there might be political change. So it is having those financial management and best practices in place as well, whether you do an internal audit, whether it is hopefully your treasurer who prepares your financial reports. It shouldn't be all in the hands of one person, et cetera. So really looking for diversity and growth in Main Street budgets under that category. And we've talked about the strategy driven. Go ahead.
Kathy, yeah, Gail has her hand raised again.
Yep, go ahead, Gail.
Kathy, I don't mean to be interrupting you, but I know some of our communities looking at the diversified funding and sustainable program operations. Do you guys have any targets or goals about how this should be divided up between the three focus areas? I know some of our government communities that are on the call have a pretty hefty balanced funding structure that's all supplied by the local municipality, and they may be a little bit more limited in the fundraising that they do. So can you address that?
Yeah, and we're not meaning to penalize anybody that way either. We have a lot of programs in Michigan, for example, that are DDAs, so they're downtown development authorities, and probably 90% of their money comes through that funding mechanism. So if that's the sort of the same thing for Colorado communities, and a good portion of your funding does come through the city, we'd still want to see that you're making some attempt to engage businesses, residents, having fundraising activities. If you're limited, so you're saying that maybe if they're a city employee, they might not be able to go out and do the private sector sort of fundraising side of things, then that might be a little trickier, but I still think we can do it like through our events and activities. I just think we need to be cautious about having a single source, but we want to see at least you made an attempt on it. But we aren't intending to punish anybody because a majority of their money comes from the city. It's just a good practice. So I guess we aren't setting any levels for like, we aren't going to say, well, the minimum budget a small community should have is $50,000. We're not putting numbers like that in place because the economy is completely different for every city across the country, but we will want to see some diversity within the budget. So I'd be curious if you know what the issues are there. Is it is there a board that would be willing to do the ask of businesses? So with the programs that are housed in city government, do they do no private sector asking for support? Is that what's going on?
Well, I don't want to speak for each community because everyone is different on the call as well, but just generally speaking, some of the ones that are housed within the local government, they might have like 90% of their budget from the local government. They can count our consulting services from the program, I think, as part of that diversity. If they tap into using those, they can also count their mini grants. But I know of a few of them that don't do any fundraising at all.
I
This
can.
is,
Oh,
oh,
Go-
sorry, go ahead, Julian.
Oh, I just wanted to share, I mean, I work for a local government and we have other departments that have wanted to do fundraising, and if they've been told, no, you can't do fundraising. You know, there's enough budget allocation there. You shouldn't need to do fundraising to support the program or the activity or whatever it might be. I don't know the reason for that, but I know that that's in the space that I work. I know it's a little frowned upon publicly even. And then, you know, if there's adequate money in the budget allocated to the program, so why would you go out and fundraise and ask the taxpayers for more funding when the taxpayers are already paying for it?
True.
And
So
this
that's
is, I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, Kim, go ahead.
So this is Kim with Rifle, and we also are 100% city funded organization. And my position is paid for by the city as well. And we actually codified our lodging tax as the funding mechanism for our Main Street program. And it is also frowned upon that we do any outside fundraising, even with our events, should be break even and not profit driven. So that could be a challenge for Rifle as well.
And I'm also, Kim, same situation here in Lawrence. They don't really, I mean, I go after tons of grants.
Cynthia, we can't hear you very well.
Hear me better now?
Yeah, get a little closer, sorry.
Closer. I changed over to a Nexico webcam instead of having my computer, and that might be part of the challenge. Okay, so you cannot, all right. So here's the deal. Alfie Bobo, we don't really recommend that happen either. We have specific projects that I can go for money for. You know, that for instance, we have an Arkansas Valley Film Festival. We ask people if they would like to be sponsors on something like that, but just for the Main Street program in general, I don't think that's gonna, I agree with Jillian. That's not exactly considered to be a best practice in these rural areas. It's not the way it goes.
Gotcha. Yeah, you know, there's your opportunity. As you said, you can get sponsors to help pay for some of the events and activities that you're doing. I guess I'd be curious, if you had more money, could you do more? You know, like if you wanted to do a facade grant program and you haven't, you get requests of 200,000, but you only have $20,000 in your facade grant program. They don't, you couldn't go to a bank and say, hey, would you like to fund this facade grant program? But because you think your budget is good enough.
Good, but I would highly recommend that you actually get an urban renewal authority program, one that will last for 25 years. Funded our grant for the Main Street Open Business program was through. There's a lot. Stacking your resources, I think, is a little. That shows, I think, that you have diversity, but we have to pay attention to the local way of doing things too, and we don't want to make an enemy them to say that Main Street program stinks. They're trying to push it around. It's hard, but that's the way they might.
Yeah. I have seen some communities that are within government, they'll set up a separate 501c3 to take in contributions or apply for grants. But if you don't need that model there, if being housed within city government is the best model and it's not going to change and you're not threatened with a change in political leadership that would take that away from you, then you probably, don't have to worry as much about the diversification. But I'll have to talk with our team. It's interesting because I think even in any other program that I've seen in Louisiana, Iowa, even when they're housed in city government, they're also out doing additional fundraising, even to support projects like the city might be doing a streetscape project. Main Street helps, sell plaques for the benches and gets people to sponsor those kinds of things. So I'll talk to our team. We're having a retreat next Tuesday to see, get their take on the solidity of the cities in Colorado that are supported. So, all right, I'm gonna get on to the next one. I talked about the having an economic strategy. It sounds like you all are on track for that. It is, just how we rolled out the pilot in Colorado is just having an understanding in your community of what your community members want the downtown to be, having a market understanding as to who they're serving and how we can grow the economy, choosing what those strategies are, and just making sure that work is reflective in the 4 points of Main Street, and then that we are capturing the data and the improvements from that strategy. So I did throw in here just, if anybody wants to know more about that process and you want to do some reading, we have publications available on our website. So through your membership, you have access to these books about community transformation, market analysis, even the lessons learned. I think the 3 Colorado communities that participated in that are in that lessons learned book as well. So if you want to know more about that, or if you don't have a strategy, you can help figure one out through there. The next strategy is preservation-based economic development. Our program was started through the National Trust for Historic Preservation. I think the best thing that our communities can do is to assure that there is a preservation ethic in the community, and that we're doing education to our community members about the importance of the historic buildings if they are threatened. So what are your best practices? If you have a facade grant program, do they have to follow the Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation, for example? Or, can they put up an ugly backlit Coca-Cola sign on their historic building and you give them a grant to do that? So we're just looking for best practices. And what are you doing to promote historic preservation in your community? Do you do anything during May, which is National Preservation Month? Do you have a historic walking tour? Do you have ghost tours or things like that we talk about the history of our buildings and our culture in the community? So that one, we're just looking that we know we can't always save every building in downtown, but at least we ought to be educating people about the value of those buildings in downtown.
Hey, Kathy,
Yeah,
I was
go
just going
ahead.
to interject real quick. So all the advice we give in terms of design and preservation assistance for buildings, like from my point of view, we always heavily encourage use of the Secretary of the Interior standards, and the advice that I provide always follows that. So, there's that direction there. And then also during the month of May, we do some special things. Tracy's really hit it off with some great stuff during the whole month of May, kind of around Preservation Month. This year, we're going to be doing some extra things. So we're going to have a lot going on this year. And, I guess we're trying to lead by example on that. We can't typically tell a community what to do in terms of codification or ordinances and things like that. But we can always share best practices, and we can say, hey, this is what works. This is why it works. Kind of the carrot and stick approach is a lot of the way we can do that with the facade grant programs and things like that. So, we're definitely into it. We want all our towns to be doing it right. So we're just here to offer the encouragement, hopefully, that they need,
Yeah,
just wanted
that's
to throw that in.
fantastic. That's fantastic, Larry. Thank you.
Sure.
Gail?
I'm just going to add one thing. We do have just a few communities that maybe don't have a lot of historic building stock. It might, 5 years down the road, but there's also woven into that their history and their culture. So, and I know all of the communities in Colorado actually have events or different types of things to actually celebrate their origins. So I kind of put those types of things into preservation-based economic development.
Absolutely. And it's captured in that third point. It's really, your cultural assets as well. So that's fantastic. And then the last is demonstrated impact and results. And that is really, telling your story. Why do you have a Main Street program? Why are you working on the downtown? How are you promoting those stats besides sending them in to Gail and Tracy every year? And really promoting that. So whether that's through your annual report, on your website, I know a lot of communities or a lot of states actually have been buying Maestro, and they do the little roller thing on the bottom of their website with the stats. Every time somebody enters, they keep track of that. This annual report is just a one pager that came from Lawrenceburg, Indiana, that I really liked. And the reason I liked it was they were tracking something I hadn't thought about before. And that's always the challenge. We at National collect net new business gain, net new job gains, number of buildings that have been rehabilitated, volunteer hours, reinvestment by the public and private sector, increase in housing units, et cetera. But Lawrenceburg also kept track of funds raised for local charities. So when they were doing events and invited, any service organization or the Scouts, people that were going to sell something or have an activity that they could charge, they kept track of that as well. And I thought that's a really interesting statistic, because in a lot of places where city funding isn't as assured as it is in Colorado, and Main Street programs are always fighting for their funding, when they can go and say, what we're doing is not just helping our businesses, but look at how much money we help local nonprofits raise through the activities that we're doing in downtown. So I thought that was a really good number to be touting as well. So, what are you doing to tell your story? Because, we have to keep talking about storytelling to keep that continued support in funding from municipalities, but also private sector fundings across the rest of our network as well. So it's sort of that matter of what are you doing to tell your story about how you're doing. And I just love this sheet. It was a pretty good summary for them. So I don't know if you've been through our self-assessment tool yet. We rolled that out last January, and it was available for everybody to take a look at. That is available online still, and the recording of that more lengthy webinar from back then. There's a self-assessment tool that we ask you to sort of look at, grade yourself from 1 to 5. So any community, even if you're not a Main Street community yet or feel that you're accredited, can go through this, and maybe you'll surprise yourselves on how close you are to actually achieving National Main Street accreditation, but you can see the scale that we have there. 1 means you're not addressing something, and a 5 means that you have outstanding achievement, one that definitely other programs might want to look to and replicate. So that is there as well. There's instructions and more detail, more specifically on what falls under each of those 6 standards. So you can link to those things from those connections, or if you go to the point, everything is, look for a post from me, because that's where we have all of this posted. And that self-assessment form, I think it's about 7 pages, but it just takes you through those standards, gives you a chance to write some notes about, yeah, we're doing really good on partnerships and collaboration. We've actually changed the form slightly to say if you look on the page on the right, there's a scoring there for the local program and your coordinating program. And then we have a column there for Main Street America, because in many states we're on site doing that, but we're actually going to combine the coordinating program and Main Street America to be the same score, as we're doing those together. But so you can do your self-assessment, and then the state will review it and make sure that that you've achieved what a minimum of 3 on each of the standards. And it will be Gail's job to still designate which communities reach national accreditation standards. But this is a good, quick community assessment process that you can go through, see how you're doing, what you might need to work on, or if you have any questions, you can let me know, and we'll take a look at that. So again, our process with rolling out these new standards is use this year to get familiar with them. If there's anything that you might need from Gail or her team on strengthening or adding, sounds like she's got all the right resources. Keep connected to us as we roll out more resources. We are having meetings. Gosh, we've already interviewed 3 or 4 companies that will be our platform for the reporting of all of this. So that'll be ready by 2024. So right now, communities are just being informed of the new standards, and by January of 2024 is when we'll be using that as the new national standards. So what other questions do you have for me on accreditation? I'm so thrilled to hear that you're all doing so well, that this isn't going to be a heavy lift for you at all. And actually, I don't think we thought it would be a heavy lift for most of our Main Street communities, though it seemed scary when we went from 10 to 6 and tried to put more clarification on what we were looking for. Cynthia, go ahead, but you need to move. We can't, your lips are moving, but we can't hear you.
I'm just curious. I think that I like to think that they're great. I just would like to know how, you don't have to give me names, but who's on this committee, and how were they selected, to represent the entire United States? Are they or are they with Main Street America, or how did this happen? Because sometimes that really well, it just colors the way that things are developed. I know that they're all probably been in the program for a long time and have seen things, but
Yeah, the national accreditation standards were developed by the coordinators. So if you remember Tom Guzman, who used to run the Iowa Main Street program, he was the lead on this. I'm going to say 25, 30 years ago when we first rolled out the accreditation standards. And so they've really been tweaked and developed by both Main Street America with the coordinators. So we've probably been Michigan, was real interested in making sure that we looked at these again. And so it's been a partnership of the coordinators and Main Street America. So I'm gonna, and then we've just rolled it out, when we started rolling this out like a couple years ago, and even when we did our first webinars, we had a whole feedback process for people at the local levels to give us feedback on things like, hey, we're concerned about this or that, but really there really haven't been a lot of those. Sometimes it's been population, somebody's, population 6,000 and they really want to have a part-time director. Those are the kind of questions. It's not really on the content, but I'd say the coordinators have owned the standards for a long time, and we just take the lead on sort of working out the details and working on the platform for it. Does that make sense to you, Cynthia? Okay.
Kathy, I'd just like to say thank you for articulating the understanding of what diversity looks like in some of our communities. It's something that can be a challenge for us depending on what the definition of diversity is. It's a concern when you come from a community of 800 people. So diversity can be articulated in a number of ways. So thank you for articulating that today. I appreciate that, because I would have asked. So I appreciate you addressing that.
Absolutely. I think one I left off even was income diversity. I've spent the last 2 years visiting every Iowa Main Street community. So I've been to 55 Iowa communities encompassing 16 weeks in Iowa total. And it was interesting to, go to some communities and, that diversity was represented even in small towns. And then I'd go into another community and their board held positions. Each of the banks in downtown had a position on the board. The newspaper had a permanent position on the board. The university had a permanent, and there were only like 2 positions on the board that ever rotated. And I said, that is not diversity in your community. Well, the banks give us money, so they get to be on the board. They had no small merchants, no retailers in their downtown, no residents in the community, nobody from another nonprofit. And so even in that small community, they needed to, even though it was probably 98% Caucasian, they needed to work on the diversity of just their business community. So yeah, thanks for that question or that comment. I appreciate it.
And again, speaking to that, that is going to be a topic next week at our summit. And that's why we did those demographic profiles for you all and covered the, with the state demography office. What does diversity look like in your community? It could be age, it could be accessibility issues. It certainly is, small business owner to resident to school system, whatever. It can be a number of different things, income level, education level, where your workforce is at and type of workforce as well. So yes, so thank you. But I made a note to myself to make sure if you don't have your profiles handy for next week, you might want to think about those, and maybe I'll see if I can't get them printed up and distribute them as well, because I think they'll help our toolkit discussion for next week. But I know that we're coming up on time here. I want to be respectful for everyone's time. Do we have any more questions while we have Kathy's exclusive ear for the state of Colorado?
I just had a quick one, if that's okay. Can you guys hear me?
Yep, go ahead, Matt.
Sweet. Kathy, you had mentioned grants that run through the National Main Street Organization. Do you have like a timeline or any news on when another grant will launch and what it might be about?
Well, we have 2 that are ongoing, which are the T-Mobile grants. Those are the $50,000 placemaking grants. And gosh, I just reviewed, we have a meeting, I think this week, even to the next round of them. I was actually surprised to see so few Main Street communities applying for that money, because it's available to a broader reach of communities working in downtowns as well. But I wish we'd have more communities applying for those $50,000 grants. Then we have the American Express Inclusive marketing grants or inclusive business grants for minority-owned businesses. They're giving out a total of $305,000 grants directly to businesses. As far as like the resiliency grants, that 200,000 that one of our board members put up, that was a COVID specific thing. So I don't know about any others that are coming up right now. I think we're sort of in a holding pattern until we get our new president CEO in place. And that's probably, oh, we just met with the headhunting firm this week. So I think we'll be lucky to have somebody on board by February or March of next year is my guess. So I'm going to think that we'll do a little bit more on that. But we just got a big Kaufman grant for entrepreneurial ecosystem work. We have 5 states that are going to get services from that, and another 5 will be chosen. Matt Wagner's in charge of that project, and that is a lot of technical assistance that is available. It's not outright money. And AARP always has grants going on. So I think we're always pushing grant money, or at least letting people know about what grant programs are out there. But specific to Main Street programs, there's nothing on the table right now.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, unless there's anything else for Kathy or for the comms team, we'll see our managers next week, and affiliates, please reach out, and managers, please reach out anytime with your questions or concerns. Otherwise, we hope to see you at the end of January when we return with our monthly webinars. Thank you so much for joining us, Kathy, and answering some of these questions, and hopefully taking some of the trepidation out of what is coming. And I know we've certainly it's been a topic for those of you who we've done our annual visits with already. It's been a topic in those. It'll be a topic moving forward. You'll be hearing plenty from us on this throughout 2023. And thank you all. Be safe out there. It's actually started to snow in my neighborhood too. So I know it's got to be getting bad and getting everywhere. I see it behind Jillian. So right on.
Oh my
Well,
gosh. I thought that was fog, but I guess it's snow.
Just grand cold. Grand
All
cold.
right.
It is just
Let's
green cold.
know.
It's coming.
No moisture on the eastern plains.
All right. Thanks for
Okay.
having me.
Bye,
Bye,
everyone.
everybody.